Welcome back to Bombastic Nation and Ting and Ting and Ting. I'm Mr. Giant and I'm back with some more vibes for you. And somebody suggested I watch this because I've been watching the Russian history and they just did a little touch on the Russian Revolution. So this one, somebody suggested, watch it. Epic History is doing its thing again. This one is called the Russian Revolution 1917. And I have heard a little bit about it because we did have a socialist government for a while on the island. And we got a little story about it and stuff like that, just a little bit about it. So the actual intricate details I was not aware of completely. Who were the principals? We know the main people, but who were the principals in it and all that? The Soviets, the Bolsheviks, oh man, I forgot the other name, which is a government entity. But anyway, we can watch this and see what I'm going on with this. Let's YouTube and simmer, see what the real deal is. Feel free to comment down below and let me know, hey, this is what happened, this is what didn't happen, this is factual, this is not factual. Please feel free to comment down below. No arguing, no fussing, no fighting. This is just for educational purposes. I shall never agree to a representative's form of government because I consider it harmful to the people whom God has entrusted to my care. Nicholas II, 1904. It looks like some dangerous words there from my man. If the people want representation.
In 1894, Nicholas II became ruler of a Russian empire that stretched from the Baltic to the Pacific. Inhabited by 126 million people from 194 ethnic groups.
Wow, 194 ethnic groups. That's
workers
gonna be hard to govern.
Lived in poverty and hardship, while Russia's elite, its imperial family and aristocracy, lived lives of gilded luxury. There was a long history of struggle in Russia against the injustices of the system. And in 1905, a revolution forced the Tsar to allow the creation of a State Duma, or National Assembly. But its power was limited, and the compromise pleased neither the Tsar nor the reformers.
10 years times.
In 1914, this divided empire was plunged into fresh crisis by World War.
What is all this talk about the people's confidence? Let the people merit my confidence. Nicholas II, 1916. Wow. Why do the people need confidence? They're supposed to make me confident so that I could participate and send their families off to this war. I'm just trying to look at it from an ordinary man's perspective, because that's how a lot of ordinary people will look at it. I'm going off to fight the war and I'm supposed to make you confident. In whom? In what? Ordinary man would ask that today. I'm not speaking for them. I'm just telling you how I would feel in that situation.
World War I was a disaster for Tsarist Russia. At the front, the country suffered a series of devastating
That was a
defeats.
hell war.
While at home, there were food shortages and economic chaos. The Tsar was held responsible for the crisis. After all, he was now the army's commander-in-chief, and he was standing in the way of government reform. His German-born wife, Empress Alexandra, was even thought to be supporting Germany, while the entire family was said to have fallen under the spell of a Siberian mystic and faith healer, Grigory Rasputin.
Heard a lot about him.
In December 1916, Rasputin was murdered by Russian aristocrats, possibly with the help of British secret agents.
Aristocrats.
Both groups determined to end his influence.
You have to figure out if they're the aristocrats, whose interest did they have in mind? Was it the people or their own? So let's keep watching. Let's see what the vibe is here.
Aristocrats, possibly with the help of British secret agents. Both groups determined
Possibly,
to end
they
his
say.
influence over the Tsar. But in the eyes of many, the damage had already been done. On the 23rd of February 1970.
Sorry about that. Let's get this back up and running.
Thousands of women took to the streets of the Russian capital, Petrograd.
And this is what I wanted to read. Serious situations, serious. There's anarchy in the capital. Government paralyzed. Chaotic shootings in the streets. Mikhail Rodzianko, chairman of the State Duma. I hope I pronounced this dude's name right. But you know what I mean? When I said earlier I wasn't aware of the principles of it, I never heard of this guy. So that's, interesting. He's the chairman of the state of Duma.
On the 23rd of February 1917, thousands of women took to the streets of the Russian capital, Petrograd, to mark International Women's Day and protest over bread shortages.
Bread shortages. Just think about that.
Streets by workers and students carrying placards that read, "Down with the Tsar."
I'm gonna tell you straight up, man. Having food shortages is not a cool thing at all. I remember food shortages. I remember gas shortages. Remember having to ration stuff. It wasn't like as bad as this, I don't think. But for a small island and stuff, you gotta watch your food. There's imminent war coming. Where you gonna get your food from? Luckily, in the island and its tropical settings, you have food growing in the backyard. So I had food growing in my backyard: bananas, corn, peas. I had chickens in my backyard. The only problem is during the little tussle, the fighting going out in the backyard wasn't the greatest thing, because wasn't the safest thing, I should say. Because I live right next to the airport where a lot of the fighting happened. So I had a couple of hungry days. It's either going outside and chancing something, or eating boiled eggs. So I had boiled eggs. But food shortages and stuff, it's not a cool thing.
Workers and students carrying placards that read, "Down with the Tsar." Troops ordered to put down the disorder mutinied and joined the protesters instead.
Now you know you're in trouble when the troops are deserting.
Prisons and police stations were attacked. Emblems of Tsarist rule smashed and burned. The government had lost control of the capital. The Tsar was told by his ministers that order could only be restored and Russia saved from military defeat if he gave up power. So, on the 2nd of March, Nicholas agreed to abdicate. In just 10 days, 300 years of Romanov rule had come to an end.
Just 10 days, boom, he's gone. The provincial government does not possess any real power. Alexander Gukov, Minister of War. Do they still have like a minister of war in the government now? Comment down below, let me know. That, I mean, probably going by a different name. What would be the minister of war in America or in other countries? That'd be interesting to know. I'd have to look that up.
Come to an end. The February Revolution had been
Bloodless.
relatively swift and bloodless.
Our revolution was swift and relatively bloodless too.
More just Russian state. Members of the State Duma, the National Assembly, had formed a provisional government.
Provisional government, that's what I was looking, the word I was looking for earlier.
The Constituent Assembly was elected to give Russia a new constitution. But in reality, the provisional government shared power with the Petrograd Soviet, a council elected by workers and soldiers that controlled the capital's troops, transport, and communications. The Petrograd Soviet, dominated by the Socialist Revolutionary Party and the Marxist Menshevik Party, was much more radical than the provisional government. Yet it supported the government's decision to continue the war and honor the commitments that Russia had made to the Allies. It was a fateful decision that ultimately played into the hands of one of the smaller parties,
Bolsheviks.
Their leader, Vladimir Lenin, recently returned from 16 years in exile, bitterly opposed
16 years in
the
exile.
war. He also demanded the immediate redistribution of land from rich landowners to peasants, and the transfer of power from the bourgeois provisional government to the people's soviets or councils that were springing up across Russia. The Bolshevik program was summed up in a simple slogan: bread, peace, and land. And as Russia's economic and military crisis deepened, its appeal to the masses grew and grew.
Our tactics, absolute distrust, no support for the provisional government. Lenin. That's Lenin.
In June, a new Russian military offensive ended in disaster, with 400,000 Russian casualties, massive desertions, and the collapse of army morale and discipline. In July, soldiers and sailors in Petrograd mutinied. They were joined in the streets by workers with Bolshevik support. But troops loyal to the provisional government opened fire on the protesters and dispersed the crowds. A police crackdown followed, leading to the arrest of several Bolshevik leaders, including Leon Trotsky. While Lenin,
Trotsky.
Joseph Stalin, fled to Finland, traveling with forged papers under the name of Konstantin Ivanov.
And he's got to run again from his own country.
A socialist and stirring orator named Alexander Kerensky became Russia's new prime minister and was hailed as the man who would save Russia from anarchy.
Hang the German supporters and spies with Lenin at the head and dispose the Soviet. General Conlove. Wow.
The army's commander-in-chief, General Conlove, believed Russia's war effort was being undermined by chaos at home and deliberately sabotaged by men like Lenin, whom he declared a German spy. So in August, he
So they wow. So they use rhetoric and stuff like that back in the day to defame people, and I guess it goes on both sides. I wonder what the other side was calling this guy. You know what I mean? That was doing that. That'll be interesting to know.
He ordered his men to march on Petrograd to restore order. Bolsheviks played a leading role in the city's defense against this attempted military coup. Their most brilliant organizer, Leon Trotsky, was released from prison and sent armed Bolshevik militias, the Red Guards, to defend key points in the city. Strikes by railway workers, many of them Bolshevik supporters, prevented Kornilov from moving his men by rail. And his soldiers began to switch sides.
Oh, wow.
Simply go home. The Kornilov affair cast the Bolsheviks as saviors of the revolution. And by the end of September, they'd gained a majority in the Petrograd Soviet. In October, Lenin decided the time had come. He secretly returned from Finland to Petrograd and began preparing to seize power.
It would be naive to wait for a formal majority for the Bolsheviks. No revolution ever waits for that. History will not forgive us if we do not assume power now.
On the 25th of October, the Bolsheviks made their move. Red Guards and loyal troops seized key points around the capital, and that night they stormed the provisional government's headquarters at the Winter Palace, an event later immortalized by Bolshevik propaganda and the great Soviet filmmaker Sergei Eisenstein. Kerensky fled the city at the last moment, narrowly avoiding capture. And the next day, at the Second All-Russian Congress of Soviets, Lenin announced the overthrow of the provisional government.
If we are not ready to shoot a saboteur and a white guard, what sort of revolution is that? Nothing but talk and a bowl of mush.
The following months saw the Bolsheviks consolidate their hold on power, while fighting a brutal civil war against counter-revolutionary or White Russian forces who had foreign support. Some whites hoped to put Tsar Nicholas back on the throne. After his abdication, Nicholas and his family had been held under guard at Tsarskoye Selo, outside Petrograd, where they occupied themselves with gardening and other diversions. In summer 1917, the family was sent to Tobolsk in Siberia, where they lived under house arrest in the governor's mansion. The following spring, the Bolsheviks had the family moved to Yekaterinburg. In July 1918, as white forces approached the city, Bolshevik soldiers gathered the whole family in a cellar. The Tsar, his wife, their son Alexei, their 4 daughters, Olga, Tatiana, Maria, and Anastasia, as well as 4 servants, and executed them all.
Man, they just kill everybody, the kids and the servants. I would at least let the servants go. Now, the same thing, kind of something similar happened with our revolution. Our prime minister at the time, Maurice Bishop, was held under house arrest. Then a group of people went and got him out of there and took him to Fort Rupert, which is now Fort George, which was originally Fort George anyway, a British fort, and took him up there. And the army came up and they executed him there, you know, along with several of his ministers and stuff like that. But this was more in an in-depth sort of situation. But once again, parallels can be drawn. It wasn't a family, but it was like a good portion of the government, ministers and stuff, that was executed that day. But that's something else.
As well as 4 servants, and executed them all. Russia's civil war was one of the 20th century's most devastating events. An estimated 2 million soldiers lost their lives, while a typhus epidemic and famine claimed the lives of a further 9 million civilians.
Whoa!
By the end of 1921,
9
the
million.
Bolsheviks had emerged victorious, and under Lenin's determined and uncompromising leadership, set about building a new socialist order. The Soviet Union, created in 1922, emerged as a world superpower following the defeat of Nazi Germany in World War II. But it would always remain a single-party state, where all opposition or dissent was ruthlessly suppressed. Those brief hopes for Russian democracy that flowered amid the euphoria of the February Revolution were extinguished by the Bolshevik October Revolution and put beyond reach for decades to come. Bridgman Images are the leading
Man, all that turmoil, that's crazy. It always starts with a few keeping all the wealth and the many suffering. These days it's like paycheck to paycheck, because the rich who have the power have realized if you give them a little bit, enough will be satisfied that they wouldn't do anything. It's working like a charm. Anyway, I ain't gonna babble on. I'm glad you guys are watching this with me, you know what I mean? Comment down below, give me your thoughts on all of this, you know what I mean? And be respectful to each other, take care of each other. Cool runnings.